Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of the Angelo Robles podcast. I'm also the founder and CEO at Family Office Association. Today, our special session is Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation, Caryl Stern. Of course, that would feature Caryl Stern, Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation. Caryl, with little ado, it's exciting to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, thank you. We're very appreciative of your time. We're all busy, and I do want to be respectful of that. So why don't we get right to it? A family foundation, such as the Walton Family Foundation, has a legacy to continue. How does a larger foundation plan its grants? As an example, do you think about partnering for several years to have ongoing engagement and high impact, or are grants a one-time only?
Okay, so the Walton Family Foundation, first of all, really clear, it's a family-led foundation. So when we think about grants, we primarily focus on three areas: K-12 education, conservation of our oceans and rivers, and then our home region of Northwest Arkansas and the Delta. And when we think about our grants, we think in terms of impact. We're in this for the long haul. We're not interested in short-term band-aids, but we are interested in exploring new ideas and finding new solutions, as well as continuing those things we know will work. So long-term partnerships.
Excellent. Your work as CEO at UNICEF USA must have taught you to appreciate urgent needs of children and their communities. And the interactions with major contributors certainly have given you insight, I guess you could say, into large donors.
I would say yes. UNICEF was obviously a fundraising-based organization. And at the same time, UNICEF USA, where I was the CEO, we were both a fundraising and a granting organization. So familiar with a little bit of both sides of the desk, but we were dependent on the 600,000 donors that gave to UNICEF every year.
Yeah, I mean, UNICEF's a wonderful organization, and you're correct. Your experiences will effectively be from both perspectives, and that makes you unique. Now that you're on the other side and in position to be part of investing into charities, can you speak or any change in perspective? In short, is it interesting investing in charities rather than fundraising and managing a large non-for-profit?
It's definitely different. I think to a large extent, I had thought through what those differences would be, and some have been exactly what I thought, and some have been completely what I didn't think. I think the couple of things that have struck me the most is, when you're a recipient of funds, you love those donors who say, here's a check, use it how you think it can best be used. And, you feel I'm the expert in my area of whatever it is my organization does, therefore you as a funder should support me to use my expertise. And now that I sit on the other side of the desk, I understand and feel that serious responsibility to make sure, especially in my case, because we're investing on behalf of a family, that those dollars are being spent wisely, that the groups are doing what they said they would do or learning from what doesn't work. And so finding that balance, that balance between allowing the nonprofits the freedom they need and trusting their expertise, and at the same time ensuring our dollars are being put to the best use, has been a really interesting thing for me to think about this year. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And then the second thing is really coming to terms with whose voices of the nonprofit world are heard and whose aren't, and understanding that not all the voices that I may know from my nonprofit experience are at all the tables where they might be.
And it's a broad question. We could dive into it rather deeply. What advice would you have for future or current foundations, family foundations?
I think that the pandemic challenged all of us who are in any kind of funding situation to think long and hard about what we support and how we support it. And I would say the same advice that I gave in the response to the pandemic would be what I would give to anyone in any funding situation. It's really important for foundations or family foundations to understand their values and stick to them. Don't try to be what you're not. I also think in the face of emergencies, stay in your lane, do what you do best. If you're not a food bank, don't become a food bank just because in that moment, but support those who can do that and can do it best. And understand that, and then lastly, collaboration. None of us is in a situation where we have all the answers or all the dollars. And we often find the best answers happen when you collaborate with others.
That's a great approach to take. And maybe a follow up to that with the first question I asked, you mentioned there's three core focuses of the Walton Family Foundation, and every foundation is going to be different. But what struck me when you said that was clarity of focus. And it's not 10, 15, 20, 30 things. It's really getting your attention to three. Do you think that that's a good framework to follow? Every family's different, but I would assume that's a great approach to take.
Absolutely. The Walton family is large and individually they support a number of different things, but collectively as a family, those are the three areas and they make sense. They are three critical, two of which are critical national needs, K-12 education, the conservation and protection of our water. Um, but, and the third one is our home region, which is really where the family comes from. So it's our backyard. And I think that the collaborative approach to those three topics does allow us to stay focused. It allows our dollars to go as far as they can go, but it also allows us to be first and foremost a learning organization. We
Mhm.
are learning alongside of our grantees, and that is our approach that we will evolve with them as we do this work together. So we can go pretty deep into our knowledge base.
And among the most important questions for many of my members in relationships in the single family office community as a family is engaging the rising generation. Uh, what has worked, I guess you could say, for the Walton family? Apparently, it's worked very well. And your interaction with that.
I think of a family foundation as the intersection of two, rather, famous sayings. We stand on the shoulders of those who come before us. Family foundations have tradition, they have founders, those desires should be respected. We often refer to the donor's intent. Um, but we are also borrowers of the planet from the children we're going to leave behind. And so we are that intersection. We are trying to stay true to our mission, to the founder's intent, while also staying relevant to the world in which we exist in now and the world we will leave behind to our children. And this is a family that's running this. And they are very cognizant of the children they're going to leave behind, and they're cognizant of the parents and grandparents who preceded them.
That's the right approach to take and very thoughtful. Uh, you can improve what you can't measure. We all know that, I believe, originally from Peter Drucker. How do you build metrics around their desires and wants?
Well, we have a great department. We call it SLED. It stands for Strategy, Learning, and Evaluation Team. And we actually have them in-house. This is our own team. This is not a contracted service. And they actually work closely with every grantee, with our family members to understand the strategies, to identify what's the goal we're actually trying to achieve. And then every grant's metrics are set against achievement of the bigger goals that we're trying. It's important to us that our metrics are not only measurable, clearly, but that they're meaningful. It's not how many media hits did we get, because just because it appeared in the media doesn't mean it changed something. But what was the impact of those media hits measured against how many did we get? It's not how many square feet of something did we accomplish, but what's the impact? What's the therefore? My team laughs at me. I'm always asking, what's the therefore? If we do this, therefore what? And that's part of our measurement. It's measurable and it's meaningful.
Has COVID made it more challenging to engage with the family and your employees in the foundation? I'm assuming yes, but how have you adapted?
Well, I had the privilege to start my job 5 weeks before we went to work from home. So
At
it's,
least you
it's
had a
been a,
5 week head start.
I had a 5 week head start, right? And I keep saying I'm going to write a book one day about onboarding in the days of COVID. In some ways, it's been interesting. As an executive leadership team at the family office, one of our colleagues called it foxhole mentality. We were forced to coalesce in a way that we might not have otherwise, because we had big issues to confront and we had to do them quickly, and we had to learn how to work with each other quickly, and we had to trust one another. So there was a forced get to know each other, have faith in one another, respect one another, work together. And I think we did that really well. On the flip side, if I'm honest, for the first month of COVID work from home, I used to have two screens up always, just so that I could be Googling the people in front of me and saying which people in this meeting work for me and which people don't, because I hadn't met everybody before we even went out on COVID. So, I can't say it was a really fun process or the way I would have really liked it to be. But I think the other thing that happened is we did create a COVID response fund. And that really took my staff to doing two jobs at once, because we kept our K-12 environment and home region grants moving. As a matter of fact, we gave away more grants this year than we did any other year. And at the same time, we were investing a rather large COVID response grant fund.
And if you don't mind, I'll do a little bit of a follow-up from that, because a lot of our families are going through this in their family offices and foundations. And ironically, a couple of people I spoke to in the last 9 months have mentioned like they just came into the position and then boom, COVID. So my question to you as a follow-up to that is, I'm assuming there's multiple family members that, one, you have not met in person yet. So you had to learn a new way of communication, of leadership. You needed to adapt from your more classic training. We all have. Have there been some advantages and efficiencies that you think that we could take moving forward, part of it being technology and communication?
Yes and no. How's that? Yes, there are definitely some things, and I have definitely had to adapt. I came out of the UNICEF world where I spent a third of my time traveling. And now I see, wow, I could have done a lot of this on Zoom. I wish I had thought of
Yeah, we all know that
years
now.
ago. Yeah. So will I take that forward? Definitely. If we don't have to travel, we're not going to. So that part, definitely. I am a person who likes to work with a team. And I think we have gotten much better at it over the course of the year. But there is still that informal teammanship, if you will, that happens around a water cooler, that the person who you might not think to invite to the meeting overhears a conversation, gives you an idea, or, there's some that informal stuff that doesn't happen. And I miss that. I miss getting in the morning, having my cup of coffee. I usually keep my first hour of my day free for people to drop in. And I then know how the kids are, who got a dog, whose grandparent it may not be doing. So just the sense of the people I live and work with. And when you're on Zoom, you tend to focus more on the work. So there's a level of efficiency that I think we've brought to the table that's phenomenal. But I miss some of the camaraderie of being in the office. I really credit some of my team who have worked really hard to keep the fun in. We had the llamas invade one of our meetings. We had one meeting where we all had to wear memorabilia from our sports teams. We've done things to try to make it a little bit more social as well, but that piece is still missing. And that's been hard.
Of course it has. Have you adapted policy and direction? And this is really applicable. It's not just COVID in the last 12 months, it's some social issues as well. So for family members that desire grant making to impact social justice and address inequality, how have you had to adapt and be thoughtful in the grant making and listening to the family that members where this is of interest to them?
Well, I think as a foundation, we have always had certain values that resonated with the current social justice call. We've always believed solutions are found in the communities we serve. We've always believed we have to partner with our grantees. I think we've re-emphasized that. The spotlight forced us to get a little louder about it. Our strategic plan that we will launch soon is all about learning and leading together. And I think that is a net result of what we're seeing out in the public world. We also, though, recognize we are not a social justice foundation. That's not, we are K-12, the environment, the home region, but that we could use the work we do in those three areas to move the social justice agenda forward. We need to make sure that the voices that aren't being heard or that don't have a seat at the table can share ours. We need to give them our access to the microphone. We need to listen better. We need to make sure that our reach is wide as it can be. And then we also need to think about where we're showing up, when we're showing up, and how our work may need to change due to some of the consciousness raising that we're getting this year. So our goal was to use our platform the way we've always used it, with a stronger DEI lens, if you will.
Mhm.
And to that end, we created one new role in our senior team, a DEI program director. This is not the bean counter. This is not the, you know, recruitment retention person. This is a person who's really looking at who are our grantees, what are our policies and processes, how are we speaking, where are we speaking, what makes us accessible and ensures equal opportunity.
And what are you most proud of in the work that you have done?
Forever, this year, the foundation.
Let's go this year since you've been at the foundation, then overall in your career.
This year at the foundation, what I'm most proud of is I came into the last part of a strategic planning process for the next 5 years, and the family approved our plan this past November. So in less than a year, we were able to coalesce many people's ideas with a very large family and get the buy-in and support we needed to move the next 5 years forward. And I'm pretty excited about that, with some shared goals. So in addition to the 3 separate areas, we have some goals, one of which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of which is around partnering and making sure that we collaborate, and a third one around leveraging, and that for every dollar we spend, we either get a dollar's worth of match fund or a dollar's worth of learning. And so that we're investing our dollars in ways that propel the agenda forward because we're partnering. And I'm really proud of that. It's a different approach. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about this new DEI job. And then if I answer it in the bigger context, what I think I'm most proud of over my 40 plus years of work is the privilege I've had to be part of some amazing teams and to lead some of those teams, to be part of developing them and seeing them grow, from the time as I was a teacher and I got to watch my students march one way in and another way out, to the privilege of leading, leadership teams at some of our nation's largest nonprofits.
Excellent. And it relates a little bit to one of the questions I asked earlier, but from maybe a little different perspective. How has your background working with UNICEF and ADL informed your work today working for the Walton Family Foundation?
It's interesting. The skill I didn't think about when I left UNICEF as applicable was emergency response. UNICEF, the earthquake hits and it's 2 a.m. and you get a phone call, and by 6 o'clock in the morning, your organization has a plan for what they're doing, how they're raising money, who's to being deployed, what's happening. Didn't really think about that as a skill necessarily. And boy, that came in handy this year. COVID hits and we've got to go to work from home. Let's just rethink how we do business. Social justice is unfolding and there's, riots in the streets, and we have to think about what that means for our grant making. Got to do that really quick. We create a COVID fund. We have to think about how to deploy it. We don't have a health team. So how are we going to do that? What's the way and we're going to do it? How are we going to adjust for that? So that experience at UNICEF, that think on your feet, definitely was a translatable skill that I hadn't contemplated. I think also the work that UNICEF does by understanding solutions are found in the communities that UNICEF serves is a value held so strongly by the Walton family that that's been very translatable. And I think the concept of values, the constant in my career has been, I've had the privilege to pick and choose and to work with organizations that align with my personal values, and to understand that there's leadership, there's management, and there's relationships that go with both. And that for me, I have to work someplace where my values align with those who own whatever entity I'm working for, as well as those I have to work with. And that's been a constant throughout my career.
That's an excellent approach to take, because that doesn't feel like work to you. It doesn't even feel like a career. It's part of your inner purpose and passion that happens to align with the organization, in this case, the Walton Family Foundation. That would be a good approach for everyone to take. If I probably had to give advice to the young ones, that would probably be pretty good to start.
Oh, definitely. When I made the decision to leave UNICEF, I had no idea what I was going to do next. And somebody challenged me and they said, stop looking at job titles, thinking like, do I want to be a this or a that? I was over 60 and I kept saying, well, when I grow up, and they said, instead, make a list of the things that a job has to have. And then anything that comes along, weigh it against that list. And it was the greatest advice. Like, I didn't sit down and say, next I will be a foundation director. And I surely didn't envision I would end up directing one of the largest foundations in America, but I knew I needed to have a job with impact. And I knew I needed to have a job where I trusted the honesty and sincerity of the people I was representing. And I am so thankful a year into this job, I really feel like on both of those levels, I got exactly what I hoped I'd get.
Wow. Well, that actually segues pretty well, I guess, into quasi my final question. And that would be a little bit of parting comments. So, to frame that a little bit, most of my relationships, and they're global, are usually first, sometimes second generation or older, but usually first generation families. Their wealth is relatively new. The principals are still around, whether 50 million or tens and tens of billions. Some of them are earlier stages, even creating their family office, let alone their foundation, and looking to engage often the next generation. What advice would you have for them, given now that you're engaged, like you said, in one of the largest foundations in the world that goes back a long while? If you had to impart some guidance to earlier stage families creating a foundation, what are some takeaways?
I think, first of all, that for the first generation, being clear on donor intent and writing it down. Very often as a family, we make family decisions. In my own home, around the dinner table, it's not a formal meeting and you don't take minutes and you don't write it down, but everybody knows, that's dad's seat at the dining room table. There's no seating chart, but everybody knows that. But 5 generations from now, when dad is long gone, will everybody know that was his chair? Probably not. Okay. So the best advice I would give would be to capture from as early on as you can what that intention is. And then secondly, to have the flexibility to understand it needs to and it will evolve as the generations get bigger. When it's an initial funder, it's very easy. I have myself to ask, do I want to do this? When it goes to my children, they grew up in a house with common values. They're going to, make some decisions. When it goes to the next generation, it's cousins. They haven't lived together. I think about my own cousins and I think, could we ever get together and decide how to spend our dollars? That's a big challenge.
It is.
And can we do it in a way that allows us to stay intact in the fact that we love each other first? And what I respect about the Waltons is that family, that sense of family is so strong. And that's phenomenal. I mean, I have great admiration for it.
That's a fantastic answer. And this has been lots of education for me. It's been fantastic, very effective and efficient. I will do a little bit of a close and we'll be done probably in about 2 minutes. Well, everyone, it's been incredible talking with Caryl Stern, Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation. I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of the Angelo Robles podcast. And as I mentioned, founder and CEO at Family Office Association. We're a global membership organization dedicated to families of success, their family offices, and their foundations. We provide original proprietary content, host global programming, a little more difficult now, or a lot more during COVID. And there is a magic, like Caryl said, to the serendipity of bumping into people, of interacting, gauging body language expressions that virtual just isn't quite the same, but it's very, very efficient. So we've been very active doing these practically daily and often doing deeper dives than the rush at some of the physical events. So perhaps moving forward, a combination of both. We also advise families on creating a family office or reinventing, especially during time of turmoil and crisis like COVID. I'm very active on social media. I recommend our YouTube channel. Simply, it's Family Office. You'll find it. And our website is familyofficeassociation.com. familyyouth.com. And my direct email is angelo@familyofficeassociation.com. Caryl, I thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. This was fun. Thank you very
Pleasure's
much.
mine. Thank you.